We really appreciate our panel here. We've got Ann, Ashu, Doug, and Neeraj. Once again, VC standing in the way between entrepreneurs and fun. So we're your last panel here today. We've seen a lot of conversations today from folks in the marketing technology industry. The last two sessions have been great from P&G's perspective as well as some large brands. It was interesting, both Visa and Intel talking about how they're actually more interested in working with startups than the big marketing clouds. So as you, sort of from your perspective, what are those next startups? What are the things that are most exciting you about the marketing technology space right now?
Want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, great. So look, I'm very excited by marketing tech. Battery's been an active investor in the space for the last decade or so with companies like ExactTarget, Omniture, Marketo, and many others. And I think we're still early. I think we're in the third inning of this overall digital transformation phase. And I can make the argument that social is still very early with the millennial generation. We've been very active in that space. I think the omni-channel orchestration layer that the guys talked about is going to happen. I think that's probably a few years out, but I think that's a space we're interested in. And then I think there's an infrastructure layer we've been spending a lot of time thinking about. If you think about websites, they all kind of grew up without an API layer. And it's kind of interesting. Salesforce has an API, Marketo has an API, but your website doesn't. And that's just because the internet grew up so quickly. So we've been looking at ways to play the data access layer.
Great. Doug?
Yeah, I mean, I would just first back up and think about how far we've already come, right? I mean, when we got involved with a company like Marketo 10 years ago, the conventional wisdom is that you couldn't even build a company selling software to marketers. And now there's whole conferences devoted to that and lots of great companies. And I think what's exciting is that not we, but the companies that we've invested in have actually transformed the role of marketing. And it is still just the beginning. I mean, for all of us, we've been talking about marketing automation for 10 years. And yet the penetration of that technology is 10%, maybe less. So we are still very much in the early innings. And what's really exciting is now the industry's been working on it long enough from a tech perspective that you've got entrepreneurs that are now second time, third time entrepreneurs that know the customers. They know the problems deeply, and they can move faster. So I see the market actually accelerating in terms of innovation right now. And we're certainly in the early innings. There's a lot of problems to solve. Neeraj mentioned a bunch of them. Obviously, there's the big data problem as well. I think account-based marketing is a really interesting area. And so I think there's a lot for all of us to invest in and a lot of new startups as well.
Well, it's hard to disagree with Doug and Neeraj, so obviously I think it's a big space. But on a more serious note, I think that I really do think it's, if anything, it's just the second wave, if not even the third wave. I think what's happened over the last 10 years is you're starting to see the web and a lot of companies that in some shape or form have helped marketers sort of light up the web. They've either provided insights or they've enabled people to move content to the web. What is missing to a large extent is the ability to take action based on those insights. What's also missing is the ability to take what was traditionally thought of as advertising and move it across the different experiences. So I think the line in reality between content and advertising, and content in all its forms. It could be a blog post, it could be a video, it could be a photograph. I think those lines have really blurred as marketers think about what they want to accomplish, but the technology doesn't enable that. And I think the technology needs to enable that. And thirdly, I think mobile is transforming all of our experiences. I mean, when you think about what mobile is doing, think about what all of us, half the people are texting or doing something on a mobile phone right now.
Not while you're talking, maybe me, but paying attention now.
Well, I was going to start picking on people in a minute. But with that, Ann?
Well, it's pretty clear after seeing that Lumascape over and over today, which is the scariest thing on earth, by the way, stop showing that, that I'm really glad that we're the lead investor in an integration company, MuleSoft. It is interesting to hear about large companies talking about and brands talking about digital transformation. And I think one of the things we've heard here today is that we can't look at marketing as a silo, that all of these companies we're building are part of a broader digital transformation. So we're seeing marketing opportunities in touch points of customers. Where is the customer engagement point? Where is the customer monetization point? We have a company called Aria Systems that some people would think of as a billing company, but it's actually a customer engagement monetization platform. The other area that hasn't been talked about much today is creative. We've talked about TV and multiple screens and TV coming to life because of better creative, but we are funding companies that are dealing with creative, actually creating really great content at the beginning. Even when you look at Adobe today, we were the lead investors in Omniture quite a while ago. People focus on the Omniture side of Adobe. They mentioned Utah quite a few times here, but they haven't talked about the Creative Cloud, and I think that part of Adobe, I have no reason to say this, but I think the Creative Cloud is even more interesting today than Omniture, which is the company we helped create. So I think if we look at the whole digital transformation of a customer and think about what should be on that Lumascape, when we really counted all the companies, there'd probably be 6,000, not 3,000.
The digital transformation, I think, is a great point. And one of the things so Terry and I have spent a good amount of time in Cincinnati with the folks at Procter & Gamble, and we're just talking to Mel prior to her session here. And what's fascinating, right now we're investing in companies that are providing the tools, sort of the picks and shovels to enable the transformation from a marketing standpoint. But in some ways, the digital transformation, the marketing is going to change also the business. So Procter & Gamble's competitors aren't the same competitors today as they used to be. So how do you think about sort of marketing's role and sort of the merging of sort of the marketing side and the digital and sort of the customer experiences in the companies you look at?
So I think there's two things that are pretty fundamental that are going on. I think first and foremost, I think the notion of a marketer owning a siloed function is going away. I think of marketers becoming really chief experience officers and owning the experience, and whether customer service becomes part of marketing, or frankly, hopefully over time, salespeople go away. Marketing can sell the product if marketing gets good enough, maybe one day. But I really think the role of marketing is getting redefined, and that is the opportunity for technology to help marketers redefine their role. And that's happening in large part because every company is becoming a data company. The core asset for Procter & Gamble isn't the soap formula. It's not that hard to make soap. It's the data they have about their customer preferences, and hopefully over time their customers, because today they have very little data about their customers. I think the second thing that is going on is the notion that marketing in itself cannot function in a silo where they don't interact with the external environment in a transformative way, because customers are no longer willing to be told or sold to. They want to engage in a dialogue, and whether you talk about it as social media or there's many ways to frame that discussion. But fundamentally, the relationship that customers want with marketers and with their brands has changed. And that's creating the opportunity for new marketers to build new brands. And I think there'll be companies that will come and sort of, take large market share from Procter & Gamble because they'll market in a completely different way.
So one of the things I did today was spend some time with the entrepreneurs who are here and said, so what questions would you ask? And one that came up multiple times was around when someone comes in this space, because unlike other investing where it's a new type of storage, so you can look at the storage market size and say, okay, this is how big it is, so here's what a company like this could be worth. How do you evaluate market size of companies as they're coming in to pitch you?
Yeah, I mean, I can take it. So I agree with what Doug said in the sense that if you looked at the history of enterprise software, marketing was a second-class citizen. There were really no large marketing companies that existed in the client-server world. And with the digital transformation, so if you use, hey, we got to look at the existing market side, you'd say, pass on the space. And that's actually what a lot of folks happen. A lot of folks pass on the space. And then with Omniture and these other companies, we've seen enormous value creation. Now, if you say market size, it's kind of interesting because you think about all the money being spent with agencies today, right? If we say there's $600 billion spent on media, right, globally, who knows how much of that goes to agencies? Let's say 5%, maybe $30 billion being spent with agencies. I'd argue all that money over time will move to marketing tech, right? That's an enormous market. Maybe there's $5 or $6 or $7 billion of annual recurring revenue today across the Lumascape, something like that. My guess is 3, 4, 5 years, that's $20 billion. So market size is really not our concern. We look for typically enterprise companies that have, as long as you have 30 to 100K average deal size, you can go get 5,000 customers and build a great business, and from there you'll figure out Act 2 and Act 3. That's my thinking.
So the market size, JD, as you know, we did a bunch of work late last year trying to size the market because my partners asked me the same question, like, why the hell are you spending your time on MarTech? Like, there's no market here. And so we said, let's go do the bottoms-up analysis. And the numbers are actually startling. There's $1 trillion spent on marketing today. That $1 trillion will become $1.2, $1.3 trillion by 2025. Today, roughly, in fact, $10 billion is spent on software, separate media. Just pure software revenues is roughly $10 billion. Roughly $350 billion is spent on agencies of all kinds. Like when you include ad agencies, marketing services, it's $350 billion. None of that, or most of that, should be spent on software because it's a bunch of monkeys running around, getting paid $50K, doing a bunch of stuff. Hopefully there are no agency folks here. So
there are a few agency sponsors.
So I think it's, the numbers we came up with, it's well north of $100 billion a year in software spend.
And
that'll happen.
Yeah, I mean, we start at the A round. It's not the seed round, but it's the A round. So it's impossible to size markets. So when a company comes in, we, do we like the people? Do we feel like they've got the stuff to do it? Do we find it a very intriguing idea in the beginning so much that if it's in the marketing space, I might call Deborah or someone else and say, hey, this company just walked in. They've got this kind of interesting idea. What do you think? I mean, they're the customer. We actually do this. We actually call potential customers. When we funded a little company called Hyperion, 2 guys came in. One was a rocket scientist, never written commercial code. The other guy was a sales guy in a company no one has heard of even today. And they spread out this scroll of 1,000 customer names and said, we could call every one of those customers, and they would say that this new product called business intelligence software, they'd all want to buy it. So we actually did the following. We put them in the backseat of John Hummer's car. I was the passenger because I can't reach the pedals on John Hummer's car. He's 6'10". And we went to 18 CFOs in the Valley, made them stand there and give the pitch, took them out of the room and they said, yeah, if they could build something like this would be really terrific. Now, we don't do that with every company, but it's impossible to see the future and size the future. So anyone that tells you that the size of market is important, really, if you can tell us why you think this is an unmet market opportunity, and if you have something equivalent to the scroll, like we've talked to 1,000 customers, or I in my lifetime as a sales guy have touched these customers and they all need these products, that's what we're looking for. But market sizing at a Series A is hard.
So one other thing that has come up multiple times is ad tech, martech convergence, and one of the things that I've learned having been in this space for 10 years is usually you get paid the most when you're at the sort of point of value creation, and very often that is involved in applying the technology and the service. And for a lot of companies, that has the potential to lead into a media revenue model. And so let's say one of your portfolio companies starts as a SaaS business, because that's what you do today, and there's an opportunity for them to really juice growth by moving into a more media services model. How would you advise them to think through that strategy?
Yeah, I actually think it's a tough question, and there certainly are pros and cons. I mean, in the end, we want to be customer driven, and so if there's the possibility to deliver a better solution for customers, that should be the first priority. The other benefit, of course, is that you can often grow media revenue much more quickly than SaaS revenue. So from an external perspective, even hiring, potentially attracting an unsophisticated investor, it can be helpful. The cons, to me, outweigh the pros.
You mean option, not me.
That's right. That's right. And but I do think the cons are outweigh. I mean, it's hard to build a startup. It's hard enough to build a startup with one business model. Good luck building a startup where you're trying to manage 2 very different sales and business models. And I think it's just too complex. And I think the other issue is that as you get larger and closer to the public markets, it's unlikely that you'll get credit from a valuation multiple perspective for that revenue. So I would counsel my companies to try to find a way to deliver that customer value without necessarily recognizing the media revenue.
Look, we think this ad tech market has lots of opportunity, but there are some challenges. One, the difference between a SaaS model and a media model can be gross margins. And it's been very challenging to take companies with 40% gross margins that are called software companies public. They're not really software companies. So we're looking for companies that can not only drive value to the customers, but drive that very efficiently as a company and have really software gross margins. We saw that with some of the IPOs in the last few years in the ad tech space. They've not been successful. And I would say that gross margins are one of the reasons. The other challenge with ad tech is that we've all learned this, some of us by surprise in our companies, that unlike the traditional SaaS companies like a Salesforce, where there's an annual license, if you've done a great job with a company, you renew it, you might even sell them some more software. A lot of the ad tech is not saleable on an annualized basis. It's only saleable by campaigns. So it might renew 1 year for 6 months, another year for a year, another year for a quarter. So the companies are much more episodic. It's not that they're delivering value, but we have to work with them in the beginning and understanding the cadence of the revenue model, the cadence of cash flow, the cadence of everything to build large companies. And it's much easier to do that with an annualized SaaS revenue model.
And you know, we obviously, you guys are big proponents of this industry. You've all been champions of it. You've been longtime investors in it. In most instances, fairly concentrated portfolios in the marketing technology space. What keeps you up at night? What are sort of the you know, what about that makes you nervous?
I mean, I have, I think, 10 companies in this space, and it's been very good up until now, and hopefully will continue to be good. But it's obvious, right? It's super crowded. It's really noisy. CMOs are confused. They're inundated with pitches. It's very hard to differentiate both from the other startups that are in the space as well as the large platform vendors that now say they do everything. And so I think the level of difficulty goes up as the market matures.
So I think the key challenge for the sector is Google and Facebook. I think that's the elephant in the room, which is I think they have while Twitter is interesting, in the grand scheme of things, it's noise. Google and Facebook have such a large share of the media spend today, and they're increasing that at a rate, and Google more so than Facebook, but frankly, the trajectory is not that different. You know, it's kind of the same team in some ways, the same playbook. I think they're exerting a lot of pressure, not just on the media buying, but across the tool stack, across the data stack. And so I think on one hand, while CMOs talk about wanting to buy from startups, I think it's hard. I think Google is able to bundle most of the software. Pretty much anything that anyone in this room makes, Google will claim they also make, and Google will largely give it away for free. It's the reality of dealing with those players.
I mean, I take the counter perspective on that. So ultimately, Google and Facebook are not enterprise software companies, workflow-centric companies. And I think that's the thing that's really changed with digital marketing, is that there is so much coordination, so much workflow involved, and the silos even within marketing are coming down between email and social and mobile, that at the end of the day, they don't really service that group. Now, I'd actually argue that they're the reason why all of us are in this room today, right? They've created this category, they created digital advertising, and so we're all benefiting from it. And ultimately, I just don't think they're ever going to be able to translate their core DNA to anything in the enterprise space, like maybe someone like Microsoft will. So I don't worry about them. If you say, and I don't worry about the large marketing cloud vendors. I do like their balance sheets, so if you would like, any of those guys would like to buy my companies, please do. But at the end of the day, look, this category is the best of breed category, you know, and we're all forced to partly because of Google. If you can get 5% better conversion by using startup product versus best of breed, you're going to take that trade every single time. You're not going to buy some integrated product because, my God, it was so hard to integrate it. No, you need the lift because at the end of the day, we all compete in Google's world and Facebook's world to get the traffic. So I don't think it's marketing, the large cloud guys, I don't think it's Google, Facebook. I think ultimately the issue right now is each of these categories has 5 to 10 vendors, and that's not sustainable long term. We all know there's going to be one category leader, right? And that person used to get 70% of the market share, they're getting 90% now. And it's a race to own the category.
So on that point, though, in my little worlds of this, there has never been a market leader. There's never been one person with 90% market share. Other than Google obviously it's not 90%, Google on the search side and Facebook from a mobile standpoint on the social side. But if you look at the tech players, it's all over the map. Now I would say probably the closest to that would be Omniture, because they rolled up the space. But beyond that, if you sort of go through the Lumascapes, there are very few scenarios where there's a 90% winner, unless I'm missing some.
Yeah, and Omniture rolled up the space, a lot of it post-IPO, not pre-IPO.
Correct.
But I think we're all saying it's kind of early. Definitely, there will not be 2,500 vendors even a year from now.
Yep.
And in some respects, we've already heard today that these marketing platforms are really young as well. I mean, people are building them, some from their own software and some from piece parts. And it's been very good for the market that Salesforce was so successful. It created an ecosystem for innovation, and other companies we funded. Inside Sales is
Absolutely.
a great example, which is a huge company in Utah now. So we'd like to see acceleration. We've got multiple things going on at the same time. The whole dominance of Facebook is a relatively new phenomena. Google's always been there. Even for Omniture, we would say every day, well, Google's got a product. What if they give it away for free? That actually kept the company moving faster
Sure.
than fear alone.
And sort of the last question is actually a great tee up for that. So who are going to be the next big winners that can become the platforms that ecosystems build around? So who are the ones that excite you?
This is about to become an advertisement for all of our companies.
Obviously,
You realize that.
portfolio.
We got to shill all day for Luma, so you get to shill for 1 minute each.
Okay, well, I would, I guess it's a bias, but it's one of my companies called Sprinkler. It's probably, there's a unicorn list I'm sure everyone knows about 130 companies. I believe it's the only marketing tech company that's on the unicorn list. And they are really going after this social and I'd say connected front office experience for large enterprise. And I think they've got a shot to be one of these large independent vendors in this category, kind of the next Omniture.
Great.
That's a sales pitch.
So literally a commercial. Is this what you're looking for?
No. If you can also say, hey, no,
Talk about my companies.
yeah, that's perfect.
You could talk about Sprinkler.
Yeah, no, Sprinkler's doing a great job. I'm in a competitive company called Spreadfast that's also doing quite well. But the other area I would talk about is mobile, and I think a couple of these people mentioned that as well. Obviously, it's where consumers are spending almost all of their time now, and there are many companies out there, Kahuna, Appboy, Localytics, Mixpanel, I won't just talk about my own, and that are taking advantage of this. And what's happening is that mobile-first companies or brands that had huge mobile presences are realizing that they have to find a different way to engage with their customers on mobile. And none of the existing solutions will help solve that problem. And what I think is going to happen is that mobile solution is really the front door to reimagining how companies will interact with their customers across all channels. So it'll start with mobile, but what we're already seeing with Appboy is that they're saying, help us with mobile, and then once they fall in love with the product there, they say, help us with email. Sure. Help us with other forms of omni-channel communication, and
Great.
I think that could be really disruptive.
Great.
So I completely agree with Doug on the thesis, and I just, be a shill for my own company, Localytics, which I think that's the thesis. And there's a handful of players now. So to be upfront, I don't think any of us have won yet, but I definitely think it's an Omniture-like category where there will be a couple of multi-billion-dollar companies created, which are mobile-first marketing automation stacks. I think the other space is media buying. I think, and again, I'm biased being on the board of TubeMogul, but I do think all media, all $500 billion of media, will be bought using technology. And roughly $30, $40 billion will be spent on the platforms and the software part of it, over time because it's going to take a big chunk. Now, it'll take time. And so I think a handful of large players will emerge in the omni-channel media buying space.
Great. And Ann, bring us home here.
Yeah, I mean, Market Share is not one of our portfolio companies. They were acquired, as we saw, by Newstar, who is a surprise player in this marketing platform space. So let's say that they're over there being integrated for a while. So one of our youngest companies, which we always try to give the plugs to the young companies, is a company called Optimine in Minneapolis. And they do a completely SaaS-based multi-channel attribution model. So you can actually try it yourself for free on their website. But it truly is a SaaS offering, very deep econometric modeling, takes in all of your advertising sources and tells you what drives what.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys very much. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts here today.